You've heard the phrase a lot lately, democratic socialist. It's suddenly very common on the left. Bernie Sanders has called himself a democratic socialist. So has New York congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. She's the woman that the DNC chair, Tom Perez, recently said this about.
She represents the future of our party. Alexandria's victory was just a remarkable reminder of the depth that we have in the Democratic Party.
Okay, so democratic socialism is the future, but what is democratic socialism? We thought it'd be worth pausing for a minute to find out. Democratic socialism is not, by the way, a wing of the Democratic Party, at least not yet. It's an entirely separate movement with its own national organization, the Democratic Socialists of America. 2 years ago, the DSA endorsed Bernie Sanders and opposed Donald Trump, but did not endorse Hillary Clinton. So at times, it has been antagonistic to the Democratic Party. What did democratic socialists believe? There's no formal platform, but the outlines are pretty clear. Democratic socialists support socialism, state ownership of major industries. That would include healthcare, technology, manufacturing. Some of them explicitly support communism. The co-chair of Portland, Oregon's chapter of the DSA recently tweeted this, quote, "As a DSA chapter co-chair, I just want to set the record straight for a minute. Communism is good." But democratic socialism is about more than economics. The DSA's official Twitter account demands reparations for African Americans in the form of free and open enrollment at public colleges, retroactive forgiveness of student loans, and a guaranteed lifetime minimum income. The DSA has also called for an end to all immigrant deportations everywhere in the United States. In New York, the DSA has demanded the abolition of profits, prisons, cash bail, and borders. Not all democratic socialists have the same views on everything, but that gives you some idea. Unlimited, uncontrolled immigration into the U.S., coupled with race-based reparations, the abolition of prisons, and by extension, law and order itself, and a massive expansion of the welfare state financed by an economic system that does not recognize profit. How would that work exactly? Has it ever worked in any country in the world? Those suddenly seem like relevant questions. At this pace, a democratic socialist could get the Democratic nomination at some point and be elected president. So we thought it was a perfect moment to speak to possibly the most famous of all advocates for democratic socialism, Cornel West. He's a professor at Harvard. He's an honorary co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he joins us tonight. Cornel, thank you for coming on.
No, thank you, and it's good to be in dialogue with you once again, though, brother.
Yes, it is. So to give us some sense of what democratic socialism is, can you point to an example, an extant example of it that works? Venezuela seems like an example of democratic socialism. Would you say that it is? And if so, does it work?
No, I don't think that democratic socialism as an ideal has been able to be embodied in a larger social context. There's different forms of it. Some are bad, some are medium, some are better. But the fundamental commitment is to the dignity of ordinary people and to make sure they can live lives of decency. So it's not an ism, no, brother. It's about decency. It's about fairness. It's about the accountability of the powerful vis-a-vis those who have less power. At the workplace, women dealing with the household, gays, lesbians, trans, black people, indigenous peoples, immigrants. How do we ensure that they are treated decently and that the powerful don't in any way manipulate, subjugate, and exploit them?
Well, I mean, if that's what democratic socialism is, then I'm basically on board. I do think that ordinary people, middle-class people, ought to have dignity. And I think that our current systems make it hard for them to have dignity. So I agree with all of that. But the details
and that's precisely why, Albert Einstein, Helen Keller, Norman Thomas, Eugene Debs, Martin Luther King Jr., Ella Baker. We can go on and on. They're all democratic socialists. Michael Harrington, one of the great founders of Democratic Socialists of America. I've been a member for 36 years.
I understand. But has it struck you as interesting that it's never actually worked anywhere? So the question is not what are our goals. Our goals are the same. How do we get there is the question. So what happened in Venezuela? They call that democratic socialism, but they don't have toilet paper. And it's less equal than ever.
But part of the problem is, though, brothers, that any time there's been the attempts of ordinary people to engage in self-determination, they can get crushed by external nations. Look at U.S. policies toward Venezuela has been very, very ugly. Nicaragua in the same way. We saw that in so many other instances where countries tried to engage in self-determination and they either get crushed, they either get coerced, and they end up oftentimes responding to that kind of authoritarian treatment. So we've never had a chance to really pull it off. So it's only been a movement so far. It's an attempt to resist the greed at the top, the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, the various ways in which humanity is violated rather than affirmed.
So here's just to the details quickly. The DSA of New York, which is certainly one of the biggest in the country, recently said...
And thank God for Sister Alexandria. She's my dear sister and comrade. Absolutely.
So they said that they're against borders, profits, and prisons. What would a country without prisons look like? What would you do with murderers, for example, or rapists? Where would you put them with no prisons?
Well, I mean, when they say prisons, they're talking about the kinds of prisons we have at the present. If you have sites of rehabilitation, education, ways in which transformation can take place, you and I ourselves, you're Episcopalian, I'm Baptist. We're Christians, right? We believe all human beings made not just an image of God, but they can be changed, they can be transformed when the right kind of intervention takes place. That's what people mean in the socialist movement when they talk about the elimination of the kind of prisons that are in place.
So what they really mean is better prisons.
And rapists
Maybe they should
and
be
others.
more... Okay, so what about borders, though?
You can have isolation, you can have distance, but you don't give up on them. And most importantly, you don't view them in the vicious through the lens of being less than human, that they can bounce back, they can be better.
So if a government's obligation is to its own citizens, and you drop the borders and have no border enforcement at all, what would happen to this country? What would happen to the poor people in this country? Would their lives get better? Would they become more prosperous? No. This country would become poorer, dirtier, impossible to manage. It would be flooded with the poor of the world, and it would destroy our country instantly. So why would you say no borders?
Well, I mean, again, no, you got a variety of voices in the Democratic Socialists of America. We like a jazz orchestra. You got different perspectives and orientations. We all don't agree on one particular policy all the time. This is true in terms of Israeli occupation of Palestinians. Some are in the middle, some are much more critical, like myself. The question is, how do you keep track of the rich humanity of Mexican brothers and sisters, of those coming from Latin America, those coming from Africa, those coming from Haiti, and those coming from Europe and Asia? That's the important thing. We know the history of America, other than indigenous peoples and Africans who've been enslaved, was to open the borders, to bring folk in, to allow people to gain access. But it's not a matter of no borders at all. It's a matter of how do you ensure that their dignity is affirmed when they arrive so that you don't end up having the kind of neo-fascist policies of the Trump administration separating these precious children from their mothers and fathers.
That's silly, as you well know. But how do you think that the descendants of Americans... But hold on. How do you think the descendants of American slaves benefit when you bring in 25 million illegal immigrants from the third world? Does that elevate poor Americans? I don't see any evidence that they get richer or happier when you bring in more poor people. You ignore their problems. That's why we don't pay any attention to their problems anymore.
My dear brother, but if we were having this discussion 100 years ago and you had millions of people coming from Jew-hating Europe, Irish-hating Britain, and Ireland, I mean, all the folk who came into the making of slices of this nation, did it not allow for the kind of coming together in which poor and working people would be able to straighten their backs up and speak with dignity and decency about issues that affect all of us? That's the history of the nation, with the exception of the African slaves and the precious indigenous peoples. So the idea that somehow now that the immigrants are here, and a lot of the immigrants who've only been here one or two generations now become the definitive authority defining what it is to be an American. How hypocritical can you get? I've been here 9 generations coming out of enslaved people, and I can still embrace my Mexican brothers and sisters. I can embrace a whole host of others coming from around the world. But it's not just a matter of no borders. I don't believe in just no borders myself. It's a question of making sure their dignity is affirmed when they get here.
Then you got to get a hold of the DSA of New York's Twitter account, because they're saying some pretty reckless
we got a number of voices in DSA. I love them. We believe in disagreement. We believe in disagreement. You were just talking about disagreement in terms of defending civil liberties. I believe in protecting civil liberties. Yours, mine, Page's, Bernie Sanders, Mumia Abu-Jamal's, a whole host of folk. But we have to be consistent. It can't just be right-wing.
You always lose me at the end, Cornell. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you will come back. Cornell West.
The battle for the future of the Democratic Party is on. Just a week after 28-year-old Democratic Socialist Alexandria Ocasio Cortez's stunning primary win, DNC DNC Chairman Tom Perez is embracing her as the future of the party.
I have 3 kids, 2 of whom are daughters. One just graduated college, one is in college, and they were both texting me about their excitement over Alexandria because she represents the future of our party.
Meanwhile, new polls show Dems are undecided about a leader for 2020. And let me just say, it is way too early for Dems to be, we're supposed to be undecided. Donald Trump was not the leader of the party at this point in time in his career. Kimberly?
Oh, so no need to hit the panic button, right, for the Democrats?
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, there should be cause for concern because they don't have, so far, a candidate that's emerged, and they don't have really a platform that seems united. There seems to be really such a push towards liberal extremism to the point where you've got theatrics like climbing the Statue of Liberty. You've got calls for violence. You really don't have a platform agenda. I mean, what is it? Don't make the economy great. Undo that.
No, I think
reduce tax relief.
Kimberly, come on. I think our agenda is pretty clear. We want affordable health care. We want high quality public education. We want ends to meet for working families. I think we have a very clear agenda.
I think
we think prescription drug costs are too high, and we think Republicans are doing nothing about it.
Well, I think if you guys had a stab at making health care affordable and it bombed.
You guys had 2 years to fix it, and y'all have done nothing.
Premiums skyrocketed.
What have y'all done?
But, Richard, if the future of the Democratic Party is socialism, then the Democratic Party has no future. This woman is a bright woman. She's very attractive and young and energetic, but she shouldn't be the future of the party. She's extreme left. She represents a very small radical base in the Bronx. And now she's being tapped as some mini celebrity within the party, and her endorsements actually matter. I'm shocked. I would love to see her face someone like Bret Baier, face a tough interview where she actually has to explain Waters World, open invitation, explain her positions and say how she's going to pay for it. I don't know if she has that inside of her yet, but it's a little too young to think this woman is the next Barack Obama.
Very tough journalist, and she's answered all those questions, number one. Number two, and more importantly...
Who?
Harlow.
I don't even know who that is.
Well, you should pay more attention.
Wow.
Number two, I think the Republicans are running their fair share of far-left, far-right candidates, including Corey Stewart, who's an alt-righter out of Virginia, who is the nominee for Senate, who is literally pals around with racists.
He doesn't want to abolish ICE, that I know.
But, so you're okay with endorsing a racist for Senate?
I don't know who he is.
Well, if he's running for your party for Senate.
Well, I'm not a Virginian.
And he uses the word Yankees and Southerners.
I need to get a referee shirt. I think I have one in the back.
But either way, like I said, Democrats are going to run 435 different races, and what Ms. Cortez is running in the New York 3rd is going to be very different than what we're running in Alabama, what we're running in Missouri. We're going to run different races all across the country, just like you guys are doing, clearly.
I wish you the best of luck, Richard.
And we're going to win.
The point is it's early. It's too early. And number one, if I was part of the Democratic Party and I had a dark horse candidate I thought was going to do some things, I would keep him under wraps too. Do you really want to stick your head out of the rabbit hole this early and have to deal with Donald Trump for the next 2 years going after you? No. So if you do have somebody, keep it on the D-low. Just keep it low. That would be my advice. I'm not here to argue with you.
Look at our graphic right there. Dems divided. I mean, that really is just a beautiful graphic, isn't it? Big, it's beautiful.
But I think none of these individuals are going to be the nominee for our party in 2020.
But nevertheless, it's a whole ideology that they're divided. Extremism, socialism.
So are the Dems, so are the Republicans. You guys are running a racist out of Virginia. He's a racist.
I do
for
think,
Senate out of Virginia.
I do think, though, Richard, if she gets too problematic for the Democratic Party, they're going to kneecap her Bernie Sanders style. They're going to rig it against her because the establishment can't afford to have some sort of lightning rod that's going to divide the party and go against Wall Street and make everybody else look bad.
I think she's going to win and be the next congresswoman from that district.
Yeah, I do too, but not the nominee.
Dana?
I would say that one big difference, you make a good point about Corey Stewart, but it's not the exact same. It was Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, who said she's the future of the party. Ronna McDaniel has not said that Corey Stewart is the future of the Republican Party.
I mean, isn't the president the head of the party?
Well, I don't think that he tweeted about him since.
He's tweeted about him after he won his primary and said congrats and look forward to you winning.
I'm just saying,
and then somebody probably whispered in his ear and he probably went, oh, damn, never mind.
The other thing is, though, I think that you also see there is an age problem. For the Democrats, that leadership, Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn, their collective age is 234 years. And you see the restlessness. Tom Perez talks about his daughters and all the Bernie bros, right? Everybody was so young, and there is a divide. And I think that the grassroots are angry. They're frustrated. It reminds me a lot of the Tea Party movement. And so the establishment Democrats are having to figure out how they can bring in this new young talent, but still win elections, and that might not be all that easy.
And I think we're doing it, though. I think if you look at we're running veterans, we're running new faces all across the country, and that's why we're going to win this primary. We're going to win back the House pretty easily.
But it makes it hard for those people like MJ Hager, who has to then defend against somebody like Maxine Waters, calling for all of this harassment.
I mean, just like the Republicans, you guys
with all due
refuse to
respect,
defend
as long as the economy swole like my arms, I don't care who you got running anything. It's not going to happen. Like, the economy
better
is the
your
key,
arms than my arms.
And we'll keep it right up. As long as we got a good economy, Republicans will run.
I mean, we'll find out at midnight when we start our trade war with China.
Reaction now pouring in after last night's primary shocker.
She's looking at herself on television right now. How are you feeling? Can you put it into words?
Nope.
Nope.
Socialist. Say it again. Socialist candidate Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I can't wait to get Marie Harf on this. Appeared stunned that she brought down the 10-term congressman. Joe Crowley was widely considered a top candidate to replace Nancy Pelosi as Democrat House leader should the Democrats win back the House. President Trump seizing on the upset, tweeting, quote, "Wow, big Trump hater Congressman Joe Crowley, who many expected was going to take Nancy Pelosi's place, just lost his primary election. In other words, he's out." That is a big one that nobody saw coming. Again, the president tweeting this. Perhaps we should have been nicer, or he should have been, and more respectful to his president, exclamation point. Ocasio Cortez today talking about her win, while also being asked why she held back in directly confronting President Trump. Watch.
I felt like our party could be better, our message could be better, and that we could be better as a country. What we need to do is lay out a plan and a vision that people can believe in, and getting into Twitter fights with the president is not exactly, I think, where we're going to find progress as a nation.
News being made at this hour on this. Laura Ingle in New York in our newsroom with more. Laura?
Hi, Harris. Well, indeed, a huge night here. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who ran a bare-bones grassroots campaign, spent a lot of time knocking on doors she says have never been knocked on before to speak directly to people in her district and get her message out. And last night, as you saw, voters responded. Ocasio-Cortez has never before held elected office, but has experience in the political field, working as an organizer for Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential bid, and also worked for the late Senator Ted Kennedy. Surrounded by her supporters is kind of the video of the night. She appeared surprised herself as the numbers came in when she saw her lead over incumbent Representative Joe Crowley. More than 57% of voters chose her over her opponent, who picked up a little over 42% of the vote. Crowley has been in Congress since 1999, and though a Democrat, had in the past been associated with groups aligned with President Trump and Republicans. The 28-year-old has been taking a victory lap today, making appearances, vowing to bring in urgency to the fight for working families, while also talking about the immigration issue, calling for the end of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Listen.
We are committing human rights abuses on this border and separating children from their families. And that, you know, is part of the structure of the agency. We can replace it, and we can replace it with a humane agency that is directed towards safe passage.
Today, Democratic House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi had this reaction to her win.
We are excited about another generation of people coming into the Congress. I am particularly excited that so many women are running across the country.
Ocasio-Cortez faces Republican Anthony Pappas in the November midterms. If she wins, she could become the youngest woman ever elected to a congressional seat. Harris?
Laura, always great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.